Another welcoming thing is just to acknowledge our position as farmers and service providers. So Eliza and I, Eliza was farming and is now largely a service provider. I hold a hat of like a farmer, a flower farmer and a service provider because of my work at MAFCA. So when we present, we're going to be presenting from our own experience and our experience working with farm workers and beginning farmers. We know that everyone in the space will have different access to things like money and other sources of resources and education and land. And these are all amplified by the identities that we hold, especially intersectional identities. And we recognize that folks of color and queer farmers and other farmers of marginalized identities have different access to these things. So when we go into the spaces of breakout rooms, please do speak from your own experience and don't make assumptions about other people in the room. If you are a service provider in this workshop, thank you so much for being here. Please recognize the power dynamic of this space that we are holding tonight is really to center the beginning farmers in the room. And there will be time at the end of the workshop to share out any resources that you would like to, and feel free to respond to things in the chat as you feel seen and fit. Okay, I think that's all my welcoming things. So now there is going to be a poll. So Eliza, if you could launch that, that would be awesome. So there's a poll on the screen here that everyone can see, hopefully. I can't see people. Is that launched, Eliza? Uh-oh. Why can't I see anything? Hello? Okay. There we go. So if there is a image on your screen, it is asking 3 questions. What is your current role in farming? Which best describes where you would like to be in the future? And what do you want to produce? Okay, there we go. For a second, I didn't know if things were still working. So yeah, are you currently working on a farm? Do you manage a farm? Are you a gardener? If you're clicking other for that, if you could pop in the chat like what you are and how you identify. Maybe you're just a service provider or aspiring farmer that doesn't feel seen in this question. And then for the second question, what best describes where you would like to be in the future? Managing someone else's farm, owning and running your own farm. Maybe you're not sure, and that's part of why you're being here. So thank you for being here. And what do you want to produce? If you're clicking other, I would love to know what people are excited to produce. So we got livestock and meat, vegetables, seeds, flowers, dairy, forestry projects. Awesome. Wild blueberries. Thanks, Nicholas. Herbs, grapevines, rad. Do you want to grow the grapes, Lindsay, or like the grapevines themselves? Maybe a combination. Okay. Eliza, I think grapes for wine, sick. So it looks like, yeah, Eliza, if you want to share back that poll so folks can see the results, that'd be awesome. So it looks like the most folks here, about 50% are farm working and apprenticing, some aspiring farmers, and 73% want to be running their own farm, which is great. So you're in the right spot. We have a lot of veggie producers in the room, some seeds, some flowers, livestock. Rad. Thanks all. Okay. Seaweed. Awesome. Great. So when we think about starting a farm, a lot of people like to jump into, I'm going to grow radishes. I'm going to grow an acre of radishes. This is a really bad example. I don't know anyone that grows an acre of radishes, but you're going to grow vegetables and you're really set on growing organic vegetables. Before you actually get to that point, what we believe is the most important thing to consider before you get there is, why do you want to farm? because this will influence largely how you farm, what you are farming, and things like where you are wanting to farm. So answering this really crucial question of like slowing down to define your vision of the thing that you want to create, the values that you hold, and why you're doing that thing that you're doing will keep you farming in the long run. Growing vegetables is a lot of work. People, work really, really long hours and put a lot of energy into that relationship with that land and those enterprises. And without a clear vision and value of why you're engaged in farming, it can often lead to like burnout and a really hard relationship to, the hustle that is ultimately not sustainable. So what we would love you to think about is the sustainability of what you are doing, not just for like the land and the soil and commitment to growing a healthy product, but for you and your engagement with why you want to start that farm. This can lead to informing things like not just your product mix, so like what you're growing, but also like how you're marketing and the story that you tell when you're marketing in order to get people to buy your product. It can also inform like how much money you need to make in order to support that vision and those values that you hold. So all of those things, all of those decisions that you make along the way of running your farm really come back to like, why do you want to do this? So for an example, I'm going to provide the example of our farm here at Dandy Ram, of connecting our values of like why we're doing this wild thing of farming to what we're actually doing. Some people call this like a holistic goal. And this is like a goal that we carry over everything that we do. So our goal here at the farm is to provide joy on sustainable and just relationship with the land and its people. It's very simple, one sentence that might seem small, but all of the decisions that we make, the enterprises we select, and the ways that we grow are determined by this goal and vision of how we want to live in relationship with the land and other folks in this space. So starting from like this as a goal and defining your goal as a farmer will lead to all of the things that you do to reinforce that goal. So here are some examples of like how we do this goal. Like what does it actually look like for us to bring joy and be in sustainable relationship with the land? How does this determine like how much money we make and what we sell? So for us, we're a flower farmer and we grow flowers and we grow seeds and we make wreaths because we find them beautiful and they bring joy. They're really seasonal. We love doing it. And we are a farm that's really based in the queer community. So we share our land with other trans and queer farmers and employ trans folks on our farm to get to this goal of more equitable and accessible agriculture education. We share land, we share food and medicine, and we also work in profit redistribution. So this is part of that like justice model that's part of our goal in the goal of why we exist as a farm. Financial stress really stresses me out. And that's something that I knew as a farmer going into starting my farm. So that is part of the reason why I have this off-farm job that I love with MAFCA. And I'm also very on top of my bookkeeping to know that the business that we're running is financially viable so we can keep doing what we love in the long run. So bringing it back to like the larger picture for you when you consider these things, when you think about the vision of your farm, there's a lot of different things that will influence this. This is maybe your own identity and your experience growing up, the cultural experiences that you have, relationship to family and community, and the business goals that you have, ideas about land ownership and how you want to share land or access land, and also your relationship with your money. So in starting a farm, for folks that do want to sell a product and not just like homestead to grow for yourself, you are relating to money and you will have cash flow, meaning there will be money coming in from the sale of your product and money going out in like purchasing the things that you need in order to grow your farm. So all of these elements really influence like how your vision comes to life. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and we are going to go into breakout rooms. But before we do that, we're going to take 3 minutes kind of reflecting on this session of vision and values. So for 3 minutes, we would love for you to get like a pen and paper out to reflect on some questions. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms for about like 10 or 12 minutes to share with a very small group. So there will be like 3 other people in your room space. So for the next 3 minutes, please reflect on the questions of why do you want to farm? Remember, we only have like 3 minutes. So it can just be a vision and it can be a few notes. And then what's your future vision and your goals for your farm? And then how does your vision for your farm connect with your like larger life values? Think about the ideal farm worksheet that we did for pre-work, and maybe some things will be illuminated by that. So if you have a copy of that in front of you, please pull that up as well. And we're going to reflect on these questions for about 3 minutes. So we're going into the 8 forms of capital. And I'm going to repeat that just a little bit so it's recorded. A lot of beginning farmers stress about the cost, like the actual physical financial cost of starting a farm, which is a real thing, and important to acknowledge that we all have different access to that financial input that goes into starting a farm. But oftentimes what's forgotten is all of the different forms of capital that we all hold that we can leverage in order to lead to our farm success. And so we refer to this as the 8 forms of capital, and we're going to go through kind of each one a little bit and provide examples of each one. And then we're going to talk a little bit as a group about like what feels the most accessible and what feels the most challenging. Maybe the most challenging is money, and that's a really important one to know. But maybe you have been farming on other people's farms for 10 years, in which case you have incredible experiential capital that will save you a lot of money and also like lead to farm success much faster because you have all that experience. So these are the 8 forms. We have experiential capital, which is one of my favorite that oftentimes people forget about, is that you working on other people's farms and you learning from other people, and even you being in a completely different industry. Say you're in advertising and then you decide that you want to be a farmer, you probably have an incredible knowledge of marketing and advertising businesses. So that's your know-how capital. Your intellectual capital is thinking about things as like ideas and knowledge. Maybe you're a really avid book learner, or you learn a lot through YouTube or podcasts, and building your intellectual capital that way. Spiritual capital, this is like well beyond religion and more thinking about like the intentions of why you're farming. And for example, like organic farmers really committed to low till or no till practices, about soil regeneration and carbon sequestration. That spiritual capital can lead you to a lot of business decisions that you make. Social capital is thinking about your connections. So if you've been in Maine for a few years, you've probably made relationships with other farmers. I know that for myself, like I don't own a tractor, and I farm in an incredible community of other young and beginning farmers, and also farmers that have been in Monroe for generations. And so my connections lead me to relationships where I can get my field tilled when I need to in the spring. Material capital refers to non-living physical objects. So like your truck or your car, or any sort of other like physical things that you own, a shovel, a scuffle hoe, that would be considered material capital that you have. Your financial capital, oftentimes what people refer to when you need startup capital is that money. Living capital. So there's so much potential that exists within the soil beneath our feet when we start farming, and our access to water, animals that we're working with, and the plants that we're growing. Our cultural capital is our shared experiences. So those are the 8 forms of capital. To root it a little bit more, I was going to provide like examples of what this looks like on our farm. So intellectual would be like the learning from farming and more organized education. Spiritual for me is very rooted in community justice values. Social is connections to like the main farming community. Material is when I started up, before I had access to the farmland that we purchased last year, it was a collection of tools and a pickup truck and some books. I was leasing land, but that was still material capital that I had in order to launch me into the next phase of my business. Financial capital largely comes from an off-farm job and the ability to save money because of that off-farm job. Living capital, I was leasing a 1/4 of an acre of land, so there was soil and water access there. Cultural, as a queer farmer, that really is connected with like community resilience as a queer person, which is deeply connected to my resilience as a farmer. And experiential, I was working on farms for about 12 years before I started this current business. So while someone might not have a lot of access to like the money in the bank aspect, all of these other forms of capital can directly lead to starting your farm and being really resilient in the start of that farm. So we're going to launch another poll. And this poll is going to ask you 2 questions. And the first one is, which form of capital feels the most accessible to you? That you're just like, yeah, I got this. I got the spiritual reason of why I'm farming. Or maybe you have, many years of working on a farm and your experiential capital is there. And then the second question is, which forms of capital feel the least accessible to you? Is it, the experience working on farms and you are trying to build those skills? Is it the financial of like, having the money in order to pay for the things to start your farm? So we'll just pause for a few minutes while folks answer this question. So Sean asked in the chat, what is our labor categorized? I think that would be categorized as experiential, if that is what you are referring to, Sean. Okay, thanks all. We can share, Eliza, you can share back the poll. Okay, thank you. So what people feel like more confident in is a good mix here. We got like the experiential of people feeling like they have, experience working on farms, the spiritual, so the reasons that they're farming, and the intellectual, so the, the book learning or the more organized education learning, some social capital as well. Overwhelming, the like least accessible for capital feels like the financial, so the actual money aspect, and then the materials, the things, and those are definitely linked, right? Like the money in order to buy the things to do the thing, the money in order to buy the shovel to dig the plant and into the ground, so things like that. And then social capital as well. So maybe folks are newer to Maine and they're still making connections within the farming community in order to build community resilience. Awesome. Thank you. So we're going to hop back into breakout rooms. The next portion of the evening, we're going to be going into a lot of resources that are available to you and helping specifically address some of these issues that are coming up for you, maybe the biggest barriers to you in farming. So this next breakout room, we're going to be in for about 8 to 10 minutes and reflecting on what do you feel like do you need to learn? Like what skills or knowledge are you really needing to learn in order to achieve your farm goal and vision? And then what are the current biggest barriers to your future vision? So if you just want to pop in the chat, like common barriers that came up for folks, we would love to know like some of those themes that are coming up in that conversation. So what were some of the biggest barriers for people in your group? Or like common themes and barriers? Money, where to start, and how do I even get land? Figuring out the best ways to make connections, growing that experiential capital, land access, especially with the rising cost of land, how to start a farm creatively, cooperative farming as a model to pool resources, having faith in ourselves, and financial capital. We talked about learning new things, using farm equipment, where to put things, land access. Other barriers included seasonal labor and employment, land access, and could young farmers work together cooperatively? Getting your foot in the door. Yeah, that's a lot for like accessing social communities, but also like markets and things like that as well. Okay, well, hopefully we bombard you with good resources that will support you along the way, especially a lot of resources around land access and things like that, and programs that are here to support you. I mean, I'm biased and maybe Eliza's biased, but we believe Maine is like one of the most supportive places to be a beginning farmer because of how many resources there are here for you. And we love our jobs and we love talking to you all as farmers. So the next part of this workshop is going to be a lot of just that, is like exposing you to what is here that is designed to support you and where you are at. Please note, this is recorded, so you can return to this later, and we will also share things in the chat as well. And you can take notes, but don't feel like you have to take too many, because we will share out all of the links that have been dropped into the chat will go out in an email afterwards. So on that note, Eliza, I'm going to share my screen, and you can kick it off. Hold on one second. Okay, go for it.
Okay, thanks, Bo. So that was great. And so for these next few slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about approaching your land search once you've taken into account everything that has been talked about so far. So a little short background on Land for Good. We're a regional organization. We work in the Northeast. We have field agents in every state in New England. I'm the main field agent. And we do most of our work around land access. So that's what I'll be talking about today. And so at Land for Good, we kind of like to break down our land search into these 3 steps. And it's not really steps as much as a framework, but the first step in approaching your land search is kind of taking stock of your current situation and your goals, knowing what you want in a property and in a lifestyle. That could be what you need for your operation. Maybe you need farm stand parking. Maybe you need a milking parlor. And also, what do you need for yourself? Like, do you want to be a certain hour's distance from your family, near an urban center, near outdoor opportunities? And taking into consideration, if you're on land now, what's working, what's not working. And if you're not on land, what is your current thinking and decision-making criteria around eventually getting back onto land? And once you kind of have thought about all of that and taken stock of your situation, then the next step is to think about your unique considerations. So what your financial situation is ownership a goal of yours? And if so, how will those financial costs fit into your business plan or your farm's operational goals? Would you be okay leasing land and not living there? And if so, like how involved would you want a potential landlord to be? And then lastly, assembling your team. So maybe that's a legal advisor, a realtor, reaching out to service providers like Bo and myself, creating a business plan and using some of the information you gathered in the first 2 steps to inform your land search. So when thinking about your dream farm, at Land for Good, we kind of like to break things into three buckets: what is necessary, what's desirable, and what's optional. And you can kind of rank a lot of your criteria this way. A lot of the stuff in the Ideal Farm worksheet is really applicable to this. And it's not just about the piece of land you want, but also for your lifestyle. Do you want to have an off-farm job? Will you need to have an off-farm job? Do you want to eventually hire employees? These are all things that you actually should think about when thinking about acquiring your land, and not many years after. And I know a lot of times farm seekers and land seekers feel like they can't be choosy with what they want. And so that's why I think using necessary, desirable, and optional to rank all of your criteria can be a really helpful framework, because acquiring land is a really big deal, and it can be a lengthy and intensive process. So you want to make sure that you're committing to a piece of land that really works for your lifestyle. There are farmers who will look for land within a certain radius of like a market or an urban center, but then a great piece of land will come up that's 3 hours away from this farmer's market area that they're planning to sell at. And they are like, like everything else about this seems great, let's do it. And then, a year later, they're looking at driving 3 hours each way every single weekend, which maybe is not what they signed up for. So it's important to be realistic, and think about what you're actually willing to do for your farm and also for your lifestyle. And then for the business model, and then also this also applies to your personal and social life, obviously, but everyone can kind of think about that on their own. And then for the business model, this one can be played around with a little bit more when looking for land, depending on your experiences and interests. So if your passion is making canned or value-added goods and you've always grown the tomatoes yourself, but in your land search, you come across a great property, it already has a certified commercial kitchen, you'll need to play around with if it is necessary, desirable, or optional for you to have the space to grow all your own vegetables. Or maybe if the existing kitchen makes it a worthy investment for you to start buying produce in. So knowing what you're willing to compromise on or what you aren't, is important in playing around with different scenarios. And some of the criteria can always change depending on the land, but we like to have people start out with what is non-negotiable and what is negotiable before they start making land decisions. So all of the things I've talked about so far will help inform your farm access methods. Depending on your financial situation or your market goals, certain areas like geographic locations or certain amounts of land like acreage may not be affordable to purchase outright. And so there's 3 different methods to accessing land that we work with in Land for Good. The first is owning now. So whether that's sole ownership, joining a cooperative, forming a cooperative, or owning a portion of a farm. So a lot of times if a beginning farmer is lacking capital, maybe they'll buy cows and a milking parlor from an eventual farm property, but they'll lease the grazing land for the first 5 years, and then eventually purchase it. Future ownership is a lease to own or lease to purchase agreement. And that's a really common way that farmers can access land, especially with limited capital. How this works is you lease land for a certain period of time with a designated purchase date, or it could just be a right of first refusal. If a landlord wants to sell their property, they could say, hey, farm tenant, I'm going to give you the first option to buy this. And that can be a great way to see if the land fits your needs before committing to a purchase, if that would be a financially risky decision. And for landlords, a lot of times they want someone that is going to continue their values and put them into practice. They don't want to sell their farm that they've maybe lived on their entire lives to someone that they don't know if they have no children that are going to inherit it. So lease to own can be a great option. And then lastly, no ownership at all. There are many farmers who never purchase land and lease for their entire farming careers. And it could be because it just is cheaper for their situation. Maybe they want to retire to Florida and don't want to have to sell their farm, appraise all their equipment, and plan their farm succession. And a lot of times people just will feel secure in their lease agreement. There are lots of long-term leases, 50 years or even 100 years. And for certain business models, leases make a lot of sense. If you want to raise laying hens and you don't want to house them over the winter, or you're planning on selling them in the fall, leasing seasonally can be a really great fit for some models. Maybe you are leasing a hayfield for a year just to pasture your hens, but you don't need to own that land. And then this graphic is a little hard to read, but we're going to send it out afterwards. But I like this graphic when thinking about farm access methods, because you can basically follow any of the goals down to see what parties might be involved in any method. So this is helpful when you're thinking about assembling your team, or what resources or people you might need if you are looking to purchase land, rent land, lease to own. And it's on our website, but I do think it's helpful to look at and compare all the possible models that are out there. And then lastly, creating your land access plan will build on all the information that we've talked about in the past 2 steps. So creating your plan might mean, researching financing options or pre-qualifying for a loan if you are looking to purchase. Maybe it's like reaching out to a lender or an accountant or a lawyer if you're looking to lease. Creating a business plan can be a really great step, not just for yourself and your business, but for potential landowners if you're looking to lease land. And we've had farm seekers be very successful, actually, just like dropping off their business plan and a proposal to a landowner in their area. In the business planning process, even if it's just a simple business planning outline, can be really helpful in land access, figuring out what your markets will be, figuring out what your cash flow looks like, tracking which portions of your business or your potential business are most profitable can also help narrow your land search. If you're a vegetable farmer planning on growing mixed vegetables, but you're looking for sole ownership in a specific area, maybe taking winter squash or pumpkins off of the table, if they aren't as profitable, will enable you to maybe purchase a smaller property or just need less acreage. So those are all things to think about. And we'll talk about, sorry, I'm getting distracted by the chat. We'll answer those questions shortly.
Yeah. There's a lot of acronyms. Thanks, Erin, for that question about what the FSA and CEI is. That stands for the Farm Service Agency, which provides loans to farmers, and CEI is Coastal Enterprises Incorporated. Is that right?
Yep.
They provide business planning assistance, and we'll talk about those resources in a minute. Thanks.
Actually, we'll talk about those resources right now. I'm handing back over to Bo.
Right now. Okay. Thank you. And I just want to pause and say Land for Good is an incredible organization, because I can speak from personal experience that leasing land, there's an inherent power dynamic that exists there as like someone leasing land and someone owning land, and feeling like your business is potentially wrapped up in your land access. So having a secure lease, like literally a lease that is written that you both sign as an agreement, is incredibly important for you to know that you're able to farm there. And Land for Good has a tool called Build a Lease Tool, and also a program called Acquiring Your Farm that, Eliza, if you want to drop the links into the chat, are 2 incredible resources that I've accessed as a farmer in order to lease land. So last year I had 3 different leases that comprised my farm, and I always felt more secure in the lease that was actually a written lease versus like the handshake agreements that I was afraid of losing during the middle of the season. So farmland access for leases is incredibly important. And Eliza is essentially your advocate as a beginning farmer in feeling good about that agreement that you're going into. So what's in front of you is some, but not all, of the incredible resources that we have here in Maine that are here to support you as a beginning farmer. I will go over the MAFCA programs in a minute, but we just wanted to showcase this resource network exists, and it's also Many of us are part of something called the Maine Farmer Resource Network. And Eliza's going to drop that link into the chat as well, which is a great clearinghouse for all of the resources specifically designed to support you as a beginning farmer and a farmer in Maine. So if you click on that link in the chat, it will lead you to a page that's housed on the Cooperative Extension website that links to many of these resources. Some of them include pathways to accessing loans. So through the Farm Service Agency, which is a program of the USDA that could, give you an operating loan. Some of them include resources around, conservation support in the NRCS, which stands for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So a lot of programs exist here that can financially help you along the way. The big caveat that I say about a lot of these programs is that, unfortunately, you often need at least 2 years of business operation in order to be a candidate for those programs. Sometimes you can be managing for someone else, and that will lead you to a place where they are willing to loan to you or start a program with you. The programs that Land for Good and MAFGA offers for beginning farmers are definitely less restrictive from that, because we're like, hey, there needs to be a bridge here to get you to that place where you can access those financial supports. So we will go over those ones at MAFGA in a minute. Some of the other things here is Food Animal Concern Trust is a great resource for livestock farmers. Many livestock growers in Maine have accessed their farmer grants that can help fund things like fencing and watering system for your livestock. Other things of note, Farm Credit East and folks like Austin Associates are tax accountants that work with people. And in our follow-up, we'll send out a doc that MAFGA has as well. It's kind of a clearinghouse for all of the logistics of like registering your business and business insurance and how to get support on like hiring an employee. A lot of this can be really overwhelming. And I just want to name that of like, that's where our role as service providers come in to help you navigate the wealth of opportunities that are out here of like, if you come to us and say, hey, I really need help with how do I structure myself as a business, we can help you in that process and refer you to more resources. So don't feel like you have to memorize all of this. This is some of the work that we do to support you in navigating it all. So on that note, MAFGA programming, these are some of the programs that I manage in my role here at MAFGA. There's 2 major ones that might be applicable for you right now. I know that some of you might be currently apprentices in the MAFGA apprenticeship program, which is great that you're here. Or maybe you're working on a farm. What comes next potentially after that is you trying it out. And there's no better way to figure out if farming is right for you than just to do it, which is terrifying to take that leap. I know some folks voiced like that, like having confidence in yourself and like just putting yourself out there is a barrier. So the programs that once you get started that are available to you are the Farm Beginnings program and the Journey Person program. I'll start with the Journey Person program because it includes Farm Beginnings, that course. The Journey Person program, it has an application deadline every single year, but it's a 2-year program that you apply to. It does require at least 1 year of operating your business in Maine. I'm sorry that my computer is making annoying sounds. So it requires at least 1 year of operating your business in Maine. Applications are due at the end of January each year. And in that program, it's a 2-year program that provides educational stipends and free access to all of MAFGA events, really a connection to a peer network of everyone that has done this program before, and also your cohort, which is around 12 to 13 other farms at the same time. And then mentorship. So we as an organization pay a mentor farmer that you choose to work with to build that relationship. So you really feel like you have an experienced farmer in the enterprises you want to go into that you can text and call and email and talk to get that one-on-one support. We also do a lot of farm visits with these farmers to come out to your spot and, see how the season's going and provide support there. Other things about the Journey Person program, it provides discounts to things like Fedco and Johnny's, and then the Farm Beginnings course. The Farm Beginnings course is a part of the Journey Person program, but you can also do it separately of the Journey Person program. So the Farm Beginnings program is a 10-week long whole farm and business planning course. And this is a course where you're taking your first year of records, or maybe your first few years of records, and really flushing that out to create a strong business plan. We really do start from that place of like, what is your holistic goal? And that is an activity that we go through in that course of really clearly defining why you are farming. And then from there, build out your business plan, including enterprise budgets and cash flow analysis, and making a financial plan for the next year. People finish that course with a business plan that they can go then and get a farm loan with if they need that in their financing. Those are two of the major programs that we run for beginning farmers in their first few years of business. The application deadlines are November 1st for Farm Beginnings this year, and January 31st of this winter for the Journey Person program. Other things that exist, we as MAFGA staff, Nicholas Lindholm is also on this call, who is one of my amazing coworkers that helps with business and marketing. We as staff can meet with you one-on-one over the phone, through Zoom, or coming out to your farm to provide a farm visit and really talk to you about what's going on in your farm. That can be everything from like, what is this bug that is eating all of my potatoes, to like, how do I choose what markets to do next year and how I grow my business. So we are available as staff at MAFGA to help you in your journey as well. For folks closer to Unity, there's the shared use farm equipment program. And that is, we have equipment at MAFGA that people can, that we loan out to farmers that can help with that barrier of like, you don't necessarily have to buy this piece of equipment. If we have it, we loan it out. And then most recently coming up soon is the Farmer to Farmer Conference, which Eliza just dropped the link in the chat to the Farmer to Farmer Conference, the Journey Person program, and Farm Beginnings in there to find more resources about that. The Farmer to Farmer Conference is a 2-day, I think it's actually 3 days, with workshops on different subjects. So that's a lot about MAFGA programming. Land for Good services. I'm gonna shoot it over to you, Eliza, to talk about those.
Great. So Land for Good's website is a trove of resources. So there's tons of free resources for farm seekers, about leases, about looking for land, about financing options, about anything you could want. There's an Acquiring Your Farm online course, but actually, I don't know if that's what it's called. We have a new course coming out this year called Acquiring Your Farm. It's a 7-week series on Wednesday nights that starts on January 18th. And the cost is sliding scale, $0 to $50. And it's for anyone who has farming experience. You don't have to have land or a business, obviously. And applications are going to start being accepted October 1st. And it will talk about farmland tenure basics, affording farmland, financial preparedness, leasing, communication and negotiation, and land justice. But we also have online courses, tons of worksheets to kind of work through a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today. And then we also do consultations. So I'm always available for a meeting if there's something you want to check in about, if you aren't sure where to start, if you're feeling overwhelmed by your land search, or if you found a great property and you want someone else's thoughts on it, or need help looking at the soil map, anything like that, I'm available. And my email is in the notes. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for holding on for all those resources. We're gonna now take a 3-minute reflection time before we go to like kind of Q&A space for the remainder of our time tonight. So we would love for you to just take 3 minutes and reflect on what's been shared tonight and write down what next steps that you might be taking. Maybe it's like you want to follow up on one of these resources, or you want to meet with one of us to talk something through. We're going to take a few minutes right now just to reflect on that. And during that time, Eliza and I are going to drop our emails into the chat, and then also share out the next year farm plan. So for pre-work today, you did a workshop or a worksheet that had you think about, like, what is your ideal farm? What is your dream to build here with your farm? And we have a very similar worksheet that's called Next Year Farm Plan, which is like, next year, what is it going to look like, to help bridge the gap between those two things. So please take 2 minutes right now to reflect a little bit about what's been shared and next steps that you might want to be taking. And then we'll go to questions. Hey, Zoe.
Hi. Bo, the beginning farmer course that you were talking about, it said that it requires like 1 year of records. So that would only be relevant for people that have already had a business going for a while, right?
Yes, but there's an incredible like alternative for folks that have not had 1 year of records, and that is called So You Want to Farm in Maine, that Cooperative Extension offers. And I will drop that into the chat now. That is a course that primes the pump for like getting everything going, things to consider. And you can check out then. I'm unsure of when the next round is going. But there's usually like an interest list that you can be added to, and then they let you know when that's open. Before we go to more questions, I'm realizing that I need to do a very quick evaluation because a lot of our work is grant funded at MAFCA. This is a really important step. So it's literally painless in 2 questions, but I want to do it before more people leave. 2 questions. Did you learn something today? And will you pursue one or more of the resources mentioned today? Thank you so much for taking like 30 seconds to do that. My boss will be very happy that we have that data. Awesome. Thank you all. Okay. Appreciate it. Brittany's asking, what do you recommend as a system for record keeping to prepare for one of the beginning farmer courses? Literally, it could be at the back of an envelope. And I don't say that that's the best option, but I think a lot of farmers stress about, oh man, I'm not taking good enough records. I'm not taking all this information down. There is so many things that we can track as farmers. Ultimately, it comes down to like, what do you find important and useful for you to track? Many times that's financials. And so people use things like QuickBooks or spreadsheets. And so there are tools out there that exist that can help you. There is no one right way to take records in regards to financial record keeping and production record keeping. So it really is what works for you. If you are more of a paper and pen kind of person, maybe it's a notebook where you write down things that you're purchasing and things that you're selling. It's also a notebook that you're like, I seeded my zucchini on this day this year, and this is how much I seeded. If that's what you do your first year, that's incredible. A lot of people get in a few years and they're so overwhelmed by everything that's going on that record keeping doesn't happen. So really it's about finding a system that works for you. We can recommend a few, and we can also provide templates. So what I'll share out in a second is the certified organic branch of MAFCA. So the part of our organization that does certification, they have really great examples of how they suggest farmers keep records. Because if you were going to be certified, that is something that they ask for. So oftentimes we recommend like that as a starting place of like, here's how you can take records about different things. For me as a farmer, I don't use QuickBooks. I use Square for my financial record keeping and a spreadsheet for it as well. So Google Sheets. But really depends on like what floats your boat as far as, do you want a spreadsheet? Do you want a notebook and a pen? Either one of those works. Could be a pile of receipts. And then you sit down at the end of the year with your credit card statement and you sort out what you spent money on and where money came into your, deposit account. Sorry if that's also like way too many options, but there really is no one right way to do it. It's what works for you that gives you the information that you need to succeed. And I will pull up that record keeping.
I have a question.
Go for it.
It's a little jumbly, but
That's all right.
I think sometimes I think about like this concept of like reinventing the wheel and like not wanting to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, like not wanting to invest my time in like creating something that is already part of a community that I live in or already existing in Maine as a whole. And as somebody that's just really in the early stages of like dabbling with this idea of having a farm, I'm just wondering if you could like speak to the pros and cons of like having your own farm versus being the manager of a farm, because there are already so many amazing farms out there, and I don't know, it feels like it's important to support those farms, but maybe it's important to have my own farm. I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, I can first pause and say like, thank you so much for considering that question. I think it's such it's a common trap that I see us get into of like, we're all going to go out and start our own farms. And like, maybe that isn't ultimately what's best for the food system. Of like, maybe we need more, middle managers or people managing farms for other folks that are retiring out or are hiring on more managers. And there are incredible farm workers that go their whole career working on farms. And that in itself is an essential and incredibly important part of making the food system and the agriculture system in Maine work. It's a very like separatist colonialist thing for all of us to go out and like start a farm by ourselves. Like that is not realistic in creating a vibrant and connected community. So it is important for all of us to individually and slow down and ask that question, exactly what you asked of like, should I go out and start my own thing? And I can't tell you the answer to it either. I'm like, that is really how you want to be engaged and involved. And part of it is looking around and saying like, what is missing here and what might I be able to add? And if what you have to offer is working within another farm and being an integral part of that community of operating a farm, that is a great way to go. And you never know also until you do it. So a lot of folks might like work on someone else's farm while also leasing a little bit and trying something out really, really small. So it gives you a taste of what you want. And I think that's what I would like suggest if this is a question you're grappling with, is like, how can you experiment with an idea on a really small scale to have it be a manageable exploration rather than getting to a place of like, well, I just went out and got 50 acres and now I'm super overwhelmed and very stressed out. It's like the food system is not going to be a healthy one if we are all burnt out trying to do way more than one person can do. So looking around and seeing what you want to be a part of, and then thinking about, how can you experiment with the ideas that you're having in a way that feels exciting and good for you.
Thank you.
Kim is asking any marketing seminars coming up, and maybe Nicholas, I will put you on the spot to see what resources that you want to offer and things around marketing.
Sure. Yeah. First, I just want to second too to Catherine. That was an awesome question, and would just take a second to say there's so many benefits to considering not getting your own farm, but here in Maine, especially the opportunities of working for other farms. My wife and I have a blueberry farm, and we've had employees come back and are trying to, build positions for real quality lifestyle. And I think that option is becoming more and more real. And I would encourage you to pursue it. I consider anyone to pursue. Like, again, like Bo said, it is up to you. No one can tell you, which path you're going to take in life. But there's a lot of stress to getting land, owning it, and running your own farm. There are a lot of benefits to just working for someone who carries that stress. One of our star employees for our blueberry farm does the blueberry harvest with us, and then goes and does cranberries or apples. So, for him, that's the lifestyle he really loves and wants, and can really live the quality life that he wanted. Like, we started today's meeting talking about the visions. Like, that was one of the things that I love about farming, is the seasonality of it. And I don't want to do the same thing every month of the year, 12 months of the year. I love the changing of the seasons. So again, just to keep my answer to your question short, I think it's a great option to consider, because your vision may match that kind of lifestyle better than owning your own farm. But to Kim's question, the marketing resources available, there are going to be several sessions at the Farmer to Farmer conference that's happening in November that Eliza and Bo dropped in the chat earlier. We might bring that up again, including one on packaging and labeling, one on multi-farm. Kind of, since especially 2020, a lot of farms have kind of joined together, so kind of multi-farm marketing, and several other sessions on marketing. And I think in terms of like workshops, seminars, there are sessions in the Farm Beginnings class, right, Bo? And I'm quite sure in the other University of Maine training course, So You Want to Farm in Maine, they also have marketing sessions. And that is just one of the one-on-one resource type of work that I do too.
Nicholas, do you want to drop your email in the chat as well?
Yeah.
Again, thank you so much for that. Other questions coming up for folks? Does MAFCA have consultants to visit a property and offer ideas or criticism for a brand new farm? Yeah, that's a great question, Evan. We often get this request, and I would say for us as service providers, it's really helpful to have concrete questions that you're asking around that, because we only have so many hours in the day, and we would love to support everyone. That sometimes that consult starts with like a Zoom call or a phone call, and then we'll come out to that spot, because there's actually a lot of stuff that we can do around like looking at that soil map, like Eliza's saying, and helping lay out strategically that farm over Zoom, depending on, where we are in relationship to you. Yeah.
I'll say also, from a Land for Good perspective, if the property has not yet been purchased or leased, that's definitely something we help with, making sure that the property is a good fit for the farmer.
Yeah, it's always really heartbreaking when we see people get into a land situation where it's all wetland and they tell us they want to grow 5 acres of vegetables, and it happens, and it's really hard to go back from that. So yeah, we can help a lot through like that pre-consult, and then after purchase, the best way, well, we can meet with you and talk through like options. The best suggestion that I often tell people is go and visit other farms. Like Nicholas and I and many of our coworkers are also farmers, so we speak from our experience as farmers and service providers. But oftentimes in that situation, you will learn as much or more going to other farms and seeing what you like and don't like and what you want to bring back to your farm. So as far as like farm visits and how you could go out into the world and see those other farms around Maine, the 2 most regularly scheduled farm tour sessions we have are called Farmer to Farmer in the Field and the Farm Training Project. And these are events that happen very regularly in the growing season. And the best way to find out about those is through MAFGA's event calendar and the Ag Services newsletter. And so I will drop the link into the chat as well, and I'll send those out as well, because we don't want to tell you exactly everything that you should do, because it is so defined by like what you like and what your style is and what you want to grow. And the best way for you to explore that is honestly seeing and talking with other farmers around the state. So I will include links to those if I can pull them up, and if not, I will send them out. So what I just put into the chat is kind of our landing page for, all of the resources that MAFGA offers farmers. And there's a button right there that says click here to receive our newsletter for farmers. Other questions before we wrap up here? So if you have lingering thoughts, now is a great time to ask them. Eliza, when is the appropriate time to reach out in the land search process for someone looking to purchase land to farm? After finding a property or before starting to look?
I think it's never too early. I think before finding a property is usually ideal. Because oftentimes people will come to me with a property and be like, this is what I'm gonna buy this. And I'm like, okay, one sec, let's look at this map. And it's like, oh, actually, this is not a good purchase. And they put so much work into getting to that point. Yeah, so it's never too early. You can always send me an email and we can talk about, what your options are, what your criteria is, and go from there. A lot of times I've found in working with beginning farmers, the land they want isn't listed anywhere yet. Like it's not for sale or it's not on Maine Farm Link, which is a great resource where farmers can post their land. And so a lot of times the work we do is just getting them ready so that if their ideal property comes online, they can pounce on that. But yeah, Maine Farm Link is a great place to look if you haven't checked it out already. Yeah.
Yeah, I can plug my personal experience is that the real estate market, as many of you all that might be looking for farms in Maine right now, is honestly garbage and shit. And it moves very, very quickly. And it is terrifying if you are looking in a commercial way at farms. And last year, I had about 4 different leases and identified that I really did need to consolidate my farm at one location. And I worked with Land for Good to craft my land search. So I had the list of non-negotiables and the list of what I was willing to compromise on and location to the markets that I was already in. And the property came up in my town about 1.5 miles from one of my leases. And the process was accepted in 2 days, which is scary and it was still an awful process. And, but because I had worked with Land for Good and also the Legal Food Hub, which is another resource I'll drop in, I felt really empowered and ready as a farmer to be like, okay, yes, this matches the things. It's not ideal. You know, my boyfriend wishes it wasn't 10 feet away from the road, but it is still works for what we have access to right now. And the Legal Food Hub, I think, is a resource we haven't mentioned, but works pro bono with its lawyers that are actually quite incredible, that have pro bono efforts to work with farmers throughout the state. And they can help with things like I got a real estate lawyer through them to deal with my real estate process, in addition to the resources that Land for Good provided me. But they can deal with, you know, they're connected with lawyers that can help with a bunch of different aspects, employment law and land and real estate law, anything like that. I'm like realizing all of the resources that we didn't include, and I'm like, let's just overwhelm people more.
Well, and the great thing about Legal Food Hub is even if they have eligibility requirements, but even if you don't end up being eligible, they'll still send you a list of attorneys. So it's like a great resource to engage with regardless of what point in the process you're in. Okay, y'all, if you haven't asked a question, now's a great time to do it because we're going to wrap up in a few minutes.